Welcome back, everyone, to another Plate Stack chat. I am Jason. Joining me, as usual, is Sam LaRoche, Tom Forder, and we have a special guest host joining us around the Plate Stack today, and that is Georgia Templeman. Georgia, welcome to the Plate Stack.
Thank you.
Sam, Tom, you're kind of welcome as well, but
I'm not really that welcome, am I?
Less welcome than Georgia, let's be honest.
More part of the furniture than welcome.
Tolerated. I mean,
yeah,
that's the word I would use.
Like a stinky dog in the corner. that's me, and just living the dream.
Tom, if we can edit the artwork to reflect that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as we have Georgia here, I thought a very interesting topic that we all get to weigh in on, and then maybe one of us actually has a proper informed opinion about, but it's never stopped us from giving our comments before. Don't let it stop you today. So we did a couple of topics about training for kind of performance, and what does a CrossFitter look like, and does it matter what they look like, and it should be more important about the way you perform than the way you look, and people shouldn't comment on the way you look. And within the community, at least within the niche of the community that listens to podcasts and the smaller niche that listens to our podcast, we got quite a lot of feedback and response on those episodes. So the community obviously feels quite strongly on this topic. But I kind of want to flip it on the other side now and talk about a kind of training that is very specific to the way you look. And if anything, the way you look is more important than the way you perform. And then how is that reflected then in perhaps that community? And then if you were, I don't know, someone crazy enough to transition from bodybuilding into CrossFit, would you have found any advantages coming in or disadvantages? How can that type of training affect functional fitness? If anyone doesn't know who Georgia is, maybe quickly go to her Instagram and you understand which of the four of us has potentially done bodybuilding. You can probably already eliminate three of us just very quickly.
That's a bit rude, isn't it?
I've included myself in the three of us, so I feel like it's...
Well, that's all right then. That's
sorry,
okay.
Sorry,
Sam.
That's
very presumptuous of you that I've never done bodybuilding before.
Well,
I mean, I want to start straight away though. So you talked about there that like bodybuilding, is training for kind of like to kind of aesthetic primarily. But Georgia, I'm really intrigued. So you've gone from bodybuilding to kind of CrossFit. Like, was that a kind of like, I'm stopping bodybuilding, I'm now going to do CrossFit? Or actually, when CrossFit first came around, people did it to be better at something else. So were you looking at CrossFit being like, actually, this could, bring perhaps, some benefit to bodybuilding? It gives physiology, like it can develop physiology in a certain way. Was there any of that at all?
No. So I did a bodybuilding competition and it just made me completely fall out of love with training, full stop. And then one of my friends one day, after about 9 months of doing nothing, just said, come along to a class. And went to one class and then signed up.
Because I'd always heard that CrossFit makes you lose your gains. So I would have thought that somebody that was doing bodybuilding would avoid CrossFit. I think people do CrossFit to improve in their sports that are kind of more functional sports, your rugby, your football, your things like that. But I would have thought if it is a more aesthetic based sport, then I've just angered the bodybuilders. Then you're not going to do the one thing that makes you lose your gains, are you? It's too much cardio, surely.
Yeah, that's one thing that really shocked me when I started CrossFit, just how unfit I actually was when I looked very fit. Like my fitness levels were just non-existent.
But it was this refining the love for training though after a bit of time off, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
So I find that interesting as well, in that George, you're saying like you looked fit, right? So it's like, I look, and I think if we look at bodybuilders, they do have that kind of dream physique, both male and female, isn't it? That's kind of like, that's the Adonis kind of look, right? These Greek gods. And then you're like, well, you look really fit, but you can't function, you can't perform. Like you look fit, but you're not. Whereas when we've been speaking about CrossFitters, and like when we had Ellie on, it was sort of people saying, oh, you don't look like you do CrossFit, you don't look like you compete. But we've seen her at competitions and we know she can absolutely smash a workout. So it just shows that within kind of the CrossFit realm, admittedly, a lot of high level CrossFit athletes absolutely look like they can perform well, and they can. But I think it's interesting that there's kind of almost, mirror images here, right? Of don't look necessarily like you're strong or fit, but you are. Look like you're an absolute tank, but you're not as fit as you look.
Yeah.
Which is better? Oh, that's the question.
I mean, I'm completely on the CrossFit side now, so definitely aesthetically, it doesn't matter. If I'm performing well, that's the main thing.
Yeah. I think often, like, regardless of where you come from, like, whether you're starting your fitness journey, restarting a fitness journey, transitioning, like, or using it to complement, like, often people get into CrossFit and are like just shocked that, oh, I'm not as fit as I thought I was be. And I think maybe one of the reasons is, like, you typically are good at what you do, right? So if you are a runner, you're going to be good at running. But then if someone kind of asks you to, run with extra weight or move a barbell, you just don't have that kind of like familiarity with it. Were there any things that, like, from your bodybuilding that really were in your wheelhouse, like from doing things that, I guess, is bodybuilding going to be like hypertrophy and stuff like that, kind of muscle mass?
Yeah, so the gymnastics I picked up very quickly, like the pull-ups. And then once I got the technique down, because I had no mobility when I first started. So once I got the technique and the mobility down, I managed to build up the weights on the lifts quite quickly. So that was definitely in my favor from bodybuilding.
Yeah. There's a guy called Sam Dancer who's kind of, I think, like, he might be more of a powerlifter than a bodybuilder, but like he's definitely someone who's just kind of like just got the muscle mass that's a little bit like, kind of although I think he probably works on his mobility as well. But there's some good clips of him from some documentaries where he's like, he's last off the run, so he has to do the deadlift first at the ranch, and people are like, oh, you're not going to warm up your deadlift. I'm pretty sure he won the deadlift. He's like, I've just run a trail, like 7K trail run, I'm warm, right? So play to your strengths.
So which bit did you enjoy the most? Because obviously training for bodybuilding is quite, like, it's very specific. Like, I will go in and I will do this muscle and I will do this muscle and I will do this muscle today. And then, but obviously CrossFit's very much not like that. It's like, okay, I'm going to come in and blitz. I'm going to go home feeling like I'm dead. All the muscles.
Muscles you didn't know you had.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like your eyeballs. Yeah, your eyeball muscles.
I was training yesterday. I was like, even my sweat is sweating. It's like, this is disgusting. But like, what was your, obviously you took to the gymnastics and the kind of heavy lift straight away, but what was your favorite bit? You're probably going to say that, but I feel like there are other bits that you might have enjoyed or loved, or...
I mean, I will always be the first to complain about a long, sweaty workout, but I think they are my favorite.
Okay. I feel like I might get in there before you about complaining. I love a complain in the gym. Absolutely love it. But yeah, I to be fair, I do actually quite enjoy a long, sweaty workout. They are fun.
When it comes to like training though, and the dopamine, whether you're training for bodybuilding or training for CrossFit, right? There's an element that you're going to get that from both. So if you have a love for training, it's just if you can fall in love with the process, it kind of doesn't matter what the goal is, right? If it's for performance or for aesthetic, that you can enjoy the dopamine hit, you can enjoy the kind of time spent on yourself, for want of a better description. And I suppose, I imagine, and you've kind of mentioned already, Georgia, that you're like fully on the CrossFit wagon now. But if you've got the discipline, right, to really focus on your training, which I imagine you have to have for bodybuilding, especially if you're preparing for a comp. And CrossFit can offer you everything and more to kind of like fill your time when it comes to training. If it's not gymnastics, it's weightlifting. If it's not weightlifting, it's powerlifting, or mobility, or recovery, or whatever. So once you've finished walking on your hands, you can start walking on your feet again.
I was thinking about the discipline thing, and I was going to mention this. I'm glad you brought that up, because I kind of feel like maybe controversial. I don't know. I reckon there's more discipline required within bodybuilding, as you said, particularly prepping for a comp. And I almost feel like with CrossFit, like if you've got that level of discipline coming into it, you don't need to be that disciplined to do CrossFit. But if you are, or you have the ability to be that disciplined, you're going to really excel at doing CrossFit, right? Because, like for us, being disciplined with our diet is kind of avoiding that second slice of cake. It's like, oh, if I don't have that, that's pretty good, right? I'll perform better. Don't look at me like that, Sam.
And no one passes up the second slice of cake. Do you know what I mean? We've talked about this before on the podcast. Mine's turning up like the fourth or fifth slice of cake. That's where I need to start, But I agree with you. I think that is controversial. I think that I guess it depends what you're talking about, because I don't, Georgia, I don't know enough about you. I should have deep dived into more than just your Instagram. But you said you did a bodybuilding competition and then you decided this isn't for me. Yeah. Or was it a series of bodybuilding competitions, or had you kind of worked up to a competition and were like, actually, I'm not into this?
Yeah, so I worked up to the one, and obviously the day after, I completely splurged on food. Like probably about 20,000 calories in one day splurge. It was non-stop eating the entire day.
Oh my gosh, I bet you felt really great after that.
I did. But I think I put on 2 kilos, so I only weighed 43 kilos after that. But I was looking at myself thinking I'm fat. Like, no, I've not got abs. Like, I look really bloated and fat. And in my head, I was just like, I can't. It's a very unhealthy way of thinking, and I'd never been like it before. So that's what made me take the step back. Okay.
And were you like, what sort of level are we talking in terms of bodybuilding? Were you working up to like becoming like in your job, or was it sort of what was it kind of for you? Just to give a bit background to me and the people obviously listening on the podcast too.
Yeah, so it was planned to kind of be, multiple shows every year. We were going down that route of it, but it just wasn't for me in the end.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But that kind of takes me back onto why I think that your comment was so controversial, Jace, because if CrossFit is your job, then that you have to be dedicated on in every moment of it. And even I guess if you're kind of a bit of a weekend warrior, then you, to some extent, you have to be a bit dedicated. Generally, like if you're, I don't know, Georgia, you competed at the.
No, but this is why I'm saying, like, for CrossFit, if you're disciplined on so just focus on diet for a minute. Yeah. If you're disciplined on your diet, you're not starving yourself. You're making wise choices about what you eat.
That's fair.
But you're eating, you're sated, you feel happy, you actually feel good because you are trained, you are eating so you can perform at your best. So the discipline is, as I said, saying like, cake, I like it, but it's not going to fuel me correctly. But I'm not going to not have the calories I need. I'm going to eat them, but I'm going to get them from foods that are actually going to fuel me better, versus like bodybuilding, where I'm not going to drink anything, eat anything, do this because I need to be dehydrated. I need to be underweight because that's going to show off the muscles to a better degree. And that requires like an extreme amount of discipline to avoid, walking down a corridor and just not being allowed to look at any of the food around you, kind of thing. And I think if you've gone from that into CrossFit, and then you're just saying, okay, I just need to make smart choices about what I eat, that's going to be a lot easier than.
Yeah, true. Granted, now you've explained it, not quite as controversial. No. Thank you for the clarification, young man.
Well, I just imagined we get all George's bodybuilding friends in. So I thought, well, actually, that then comes on to the next thing. Maybe I wanted to kind of just steer the conversation to a degree, because I'm also really intrigued about the community. Because, and this is basically where this all came from, because I think you'd mentioned something to me about the community being very, what you love about CrossFit was all of this and the community kind of thing, and how different it was from bodybuilding. And I was like, yeah, it's really interesting. I'd love to ask you more questions about that, but I better make sure you've got a microphone when I do that, because can't waste this content. So, I am intrigued, because as I said, when we've done episodes on here, just talking about the way people look, the community has been like rallying behind that. They love that. They're kind of like, yes, you know, I think when Ellie put out like a request for comments people had, she was getting responses from different people about the different things they'd heard. And I feel like when I'm at the box, I see the way people react. And, you know, when someone has put on some muscle and they're feeling good about it and they're happy about it, other people are there telling them how good they look and, you know, how strong they're looking. And at the same time, if it's somebody that doesn't really care about the way they look and that's not what's important, people are, you know, commending them for other things within the gym that they're doing. There's just sort of this very positive upbuilding spirit kind of around what people are doing. Is that the case in bodybuilding?
Not at all, no. From my experience with it, you have your very small, close, tight-knit circle in bodybuilding, and then outside of that it is very much just highly competitive, you know, just nitpicking at what they look like, where you can improve on what they look like.
I can just imagine that. I can actually, I mean, I can't really comment on people who are extremely, there's people who work out just to have a good physique. I can't comment on that because that is absolutely not what I do, as you could probably tell if you have even swiped through my feed on Instagram. But I think that's really interesting how people, I guess maybe what I'm getting from you is it's more of a toxic kind of situation. And I don't mean that, well, maybe I'm not sure how I can mean that not in a sort of derogatory way, but it certainly seems that way. Like, you know, oh well, you could have done this and you could do that and you could do this, and, you know, oh, if you only ate a bit less, or, you know, or whatever it was, or, you know, you took this thing or whatever. Yeah.
Georgia, do you were reflecting on like how you felt after that competition, you know, and that you ate a lot, but you felt fat even though you were 40 something kilos, and that you felt mentally you couldn't sustain this, right? It wasn't healthy physically, mentally. Do you, talking about the community there, or perhaps at least from a CrossFit point of view, a functional fitness point of view, what we might deem to be community, do you think perhaps that doesn't help with that kind of approach because you always feel critiqued by those around you that are doing the same thing? There's not like that. And I'm not asking you to kind of like just slate the whole community. I recognize you're going to have friends, people you know, who still do that. But, you know, if you're constantly feeling like those around you outside of your inner circle are nitpicking at how you could be better, that you're inevitably always going to be looking at yourself in that kind of, with that same mindset, which could be quite kind of non-sustainable.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, it's just, yeah, looking at yourself, knowing how much hard work you put into it, and then knowing that there's going to be someone there looking, saying, like you've said, if she just ate a little bit less, you know, if she reeled it in a bit more, it'd have been better.
Because I suppose it happens like across the board, right? Like, even within CrossFit, and it's funny because I was gonna say, and even people are maybe trying to be helpful at times. Like sometimes what they're saying, they're not necessarily, because we want to assume the best in all people, and like, you know, Georgia seems like a lovely person. She was a bodybuilder, so we can't say that bodybuilders are horrible people, right? They're nice people as well, and they've, you know, they're this is the thing they love. And when, you know, like CrossFitters, when they're passionate about something, they want to tell everyone, they want to share it, they want to give unsolicited advice. But for us, that might be advice on, you know, on your snatch or your clean or a gymnastic movement. And it's sort of like, you know, if you just tweaked this a little bit, you'd probably be, you know, a bit quicker under the bar here. You could have got that. Like today, I missed a lift twice, and someone was like, "Oh, you had it, but your elbow did this," and I'm like, "Great, you know, that's just what I want to hear." When I failed it twice. And that's fine because it's a disconnect, isn't it? It's like, okay, I can work on that. I can improve my snatch. That's fine. But when the thing that they are critiquing is not a movement, but it is you yourself, it's different, right? And it's like, oh, it's me that they don't like. It's not my ability to do this that's not good. It's me. I'm not good. And obviously, if you're hearing that constantly, that is going to have an effect. But I would just like to pivot in the other direction again for a second. I'm all over the place today.
You are, man. Are you okay?
I'm fine. It's what I don't want to lose. I don't want to lose the bodybuilding audience we brought in today. Because what I was going to say is it's incredibly hard work. People are going to be critical of what you're doing, not of what you're doing, but of maybe how you could have done this a little bit better. And you're saying about after the competition how you felt like, and you binged and you felt awful after and all of that. But how did you feel like at the competition, just before the competition, or when you were on the stage? And you had worked hard and you had, and you put in that work. And I imagine you were happy with the way you looked when you were up on stage. Like, was that worth it? The work that you put in, did you get that kind of reward from all your hard work? Maybe the same way you do when you do a competition, for example, a CrossFit competition, I should say.
Yes, I did. It's just the aftermath that put the downer on it for me. Actually being on stage doing it felt good.
Was that so? The competition, was that the one on your? Is it on your Instagram? The one where you're wearing the green outfit? That was cool. Yes. Yeah, you were a lot, let's say, bronzer than you are now.
Yeah, just a little bit of tan.
Yeah, just a bit.
Yeah. I mean, I'm tempted to get into bodybuilding just so I can finally have a tan. I mean, that would be great. Just for once in my life, to be a different color would be nice.
Yeah. Well, I think going back to the what I've tarred as toxicity. Actually, the more we've kind of unpacked that, Jason kind of put his finger on why it feels toxic, because it is about you. It's not about, because the move, your movement. If someone's trying to give you, as Jason was talking about, I watched the Instagram video today of him missing the snatch. Fortunately,
he watched it multiple times.
Oh yeah, I was picking it apart, mate. No, I'm hardly one to talk. But as you say, like, it is picking out that movement, like the thing that you could, a thing you could do differently, rather than like, if you could just be different, like, do you know what I mean? If you could just like alter your physicality, and just change like everything about you, then but that feels more toxic because it's a personal thing, not something that and I guess as you say, the more you hear that, the more toxic it will feel.
Especially when it's not anything you can change. It's not even about the muscles. They're going, it's your ears. To be honest, that's the problem. Could you do anything about that? You're like, what?
And I don't like you talking about my ears. If you could just not be a wingnut, that would be brilliant. Yeah, but
I thought Tom was about to speak.
I was going to say something actually, and so like, I know we're maybe we're talking from the outside about the community within bodybuilding or lack of what we would perceive to be community, but Georgia, you've experienced both, because I guess to put a constructive angle on it, like, how does CrossFit have community so ingrained in its core, and that kind of like lifting each other's up as well as lifting yourself up? And having only really I was never really big into team sports. I generally warmed the bench. And so but I'm intrigued, and I think you're the best placed of the four of us, I think, unless the others want to wade in, but I'm going to give you first thought on, you've experienced both, and coming into the CrossFit community relatively recently, can you put a finger on like why does CrossFit seem to have community at front and center versus, say, there are many other ways people go to the gym to train, but community seems to just really stand out within the CrossFit space?
Yeah, so I think coming into CrossFit, it was very intimidating, because from not knowing how to do anything, like, it's always kind of like wanting to be in the back corner and just watching everyone else. And the thing that shocked me straight away was, I think I kicked up into a handstand against the wall and I got compliments from that. And then, the next day somebody snatches 95, whereas I'm there with my empty bar, and again, complimenting, giving the constructive criticism Like everybody's just so happy for all of the smallest improvements and achievements.
Yeah.
Does that feel different? Because again, I'm being very presumptuous about. I've never really even I've met a bodybuilder before. I've always loved Arnie, but that's about as close as I've got. But so did you? Obviously, CrossFit is a group activity, generally speaking. Bodybuilding, do you kind of just take yourself to the gym and do it by yourself, and that's what you do? So
Yeah.
is that what it feels like as the difference? Like,
yeah, bodybuilding's a very solo sport.
okay, and did that? Obviously, that's the massive change, I guess, and that's where I guess you feel the community a bit more. But it was there that would you have like, because obviously in CrossFit, like the people who are competing will go to like training camps or whatever. Were there kind of similar things within the bodybuilding space?
Not really, no. Obviously, we had posing seminars, which were always a bizarre thing to do. Getting in a bikini in a room full of girls you don't know, that was always great fun. But no,
insert sexist comment there. Yeah.
So I want to ask more actually on posing, because I think it's, unless you've done it, you can't appreciate the workout that actually is, right?
Oh,
so muscle activation and stuff, and to take that but then into CrossFit, I mean, so the word I think is proprioception, so a real awareness of like, so when we talk about doing like Olympic weightlifting, it's like, are your lats engaged, are your elbows down, armpits forward? If you've done a lot of kind of posing for bodybuilding, you're going to have a lot better appreciation for knowing which, are your hamstrings loaded. For I think a lot of people who get into functional movement for the first time, they're kind of like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And so that must be really interesting in the, we're always like chest up, knees out, but for you, was it a little bit more like, actually, I can understand the biomechanics of what I'm doing?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's why I picked up like the kipping and the gymnastics so quickly, because as soon as they say engage your lats, it's just an instant thing for me now.
You're
like
just like,
Batman.
wow.
Yeah.
Person behind you like getting knocked out or something. Like, yeah, all right.
Well, that sort of leads on then to a question I had, because I think that's true. Like you're talking of kind of a pull up and like engage your lats, whereas you saw, especially somebody who's new into CrossFit, looking at a pull up, they're thinking arms, right? I'm pulling myself up with my arms. So that's an arm movement, and the idea that actually it's coming from much further back, and you've got to engage everything up this chain, and that's all going to help you. So having, that's one of the tools that you've brought over, because I was wondering if there are elements from training for bodybuilding that either you still incorporate because they're beneficial, you've sort of seen the benefit they've given you, or that you feel like, oh, for people that maybe aren't doing this would be a good little thing that you could incorporate into your training that will benefit you in CrossFit as well. You're nodding, so I'm hoping the answer is yes. And then you're going to give us some great secrets. And if they're really, really good, we'll edit them out of the podcast and keep them for ourselves. If they're just
put them on our Patreon
behind a massive paywall.
Yeah, so I think the main thing that I've brought over from bodybuilding is not ignoring the strict movements. So everyone's very quick to want to be able to kip pull up or butterfly pull up, but then you ask them to do strict and they can barely do 2 strict pull-ups together. And
we should definitely get you to talking to Hunter McIntyre, because he's very hot on this same subject.
Yeah. Well, I was about to ask a very personal question then, but I'm sure if you can do 10 unbroken strict pull-ups, you're Hunter McIntyre's cup of tea. That was, that's where I was going to go with that.
I think that the strict movement thing is really important. I know that's something that is really like hammered at CrossFit Bath, is kind of, if somebody's asking about doing a certain kipping movement, very often the question is, well, can you do a strict one? And if not, do that first. Like that's the and we have a lot of programming with strict movements, and I'm very much a fan. I think I've said this on the podcast before, that I just would love a a big CrossFit event, be it the Games or Rogue or Dubai or something, that just didn't have any kipping movements, just so I could enjoy watching it on YouTube without all the comment section blowing up with not even real pull-ups. And it's just
like strict Cindy. The issue with that though, and I think because the thing is inherently with a CrossFit workout though, is like it's going to be like an AMRAP or at least a decent number of reps, and so you might be looking to do, so you almost need to do like tempo strict so that you can kind of really see that people are, because like they do things like burpee pull-ups, right, which isn't kipping in the same way, but unless like
a big jump into a pull-up though, isn't it?
Yeah. It's a dynamic pull-up, right? It's not kipping, it's dynamic pull-up. But I think even if you're doing 5 strict pull-ups as fast as possible, they start to look a little bit fishy, like in more than one way.
Well, one of the interesting things that I'd like to see in a competition is like a pull-up bleep test. So you have to do, obviously, if you've ever done a bleep test, you obviously normally you'd run from end to end and you'd end up on the bleep, but you do. With this one, you would do a strict pull up on every beep until obviously you couldn't do it anymore, or you beat the bleep. No one's beating
death by pull ups is a good one.
Yeah. Just have them all hang on one really long bar, and then just keep going. And people drop maybe tank of sharks underneath, something like that. Just add a little
mate. Incorporating. I'm all about incorporating the Squid Game into it like that. We'll bang on that.
So Georgia, I want to ask you about so you've competed in bodybuilding, but you're very, I think I've seen you at least 2 competitions this year, and I'm pretty sure I've only been to 4 competitions, so that's a good percentage. Like, how does that feeling of kind of competing in CrossFit functional fitness compare for you compared to say competing on the stage in bodybuilding? Like, both of them you prepare for, both of them inevitably there's nerves, especially when you consider posing itself is a workout and you want to be able to do that right. But how was talk about your first kind of like CrossFit competition experience?
Interesting, I think would probably be the best word for it. It wasn't what I was expecting at all. And again, girls on, because the first one I did was the Battle for Middle Ground Jailbreak Tour. Was
that at Faber?
It was, yeah.
Oh, okay.
We have been to the same competition before.
Yeah. We were there. Yeah. Both Sam and I were there. Yeah.
Well, I said to Georgia earlier, have we been at the same competition before? She was like, "Oh, I don't think so."
He was the MC.
Oh, was you?
Well, that makes you feel good actually, because that proves that I was doing my job properly. Because the MC is not supposed to be about you; it's supposed to be about the athlete. So I'm happy.
There's a little light bulb going off now, though, for Georgia, and she's like making connections.
There it is, yeah.
So, you say it was interesting. I mean, we were there. No, the weather wasn't great. How was that sled in the grass?
I think there's multiple photos of me just about to have a breakdown whilst pushing that thing.
Was there any point during that you thought, you know what, bodybuilding wasn't that bad? Maybe.
Yeah. On that sled, I thought, bodybuilding was fine. I get drunk, I walk on stage in heels, we're good.
Well, I don't know. Drunk and walking on stage in heels sounds dangerous. That's
fine.
Yeah. There's no sled in muddy grass.
That's all I care about, yeah. But yeah, it was like even the girls on other teams and people that are in different categories and heats, just how nice and supportive and friendly everyone was. Like they wasn't there to support us, but when we were struggling, they were there cheering, shouting, like giving the encouragement for it.
I think that's something that like we're very quick to kind of claim as part of CrossFit, right? And we say even at the games you see this, that somebody's struggling and the other competitors that theoretically are thinking, well, hold on, the worse you do on this event, the better it is for me for the next event, kind of thing, are out there giving them advice, helping, cheering them on, getting the crowd all rallied for that. We know Chase Ingram hates this, but that's what they're doing. They're getting the support. Whereas and we kind of say, well, that's CrossFit, and you don't see that in other sports, and it's easy to say that from the inside. What's interesting is to then be in the outside and sort of say, yeah, you don't see that. Actually, it's the opposite. People are maybe deliberately giving you bad advice because they want you to do worse so that they can do better. So it's a real interesting kind of, well, this is why I wanted to talk about it, because I think sometimes, you know, we talk about being in our little bubble, like our CrossFit bubble, and just kind of seeing everything as wonderful within CrossFit. But sometimes it is nice to contrast it to what else there is available, and then maybe decide, you know what, I'm quite happy where I am. But I do think there are elements of bodybuilding that are good to incorporate. And I also think that, you know, a lot of us got into even doing CrossFit because of wanting to change the way we look. And then maybe later it came like the way we perform. But I think, you know, start like it, I'm of the opinion, if it doesn't matter what the motive is, it's better you're doing something than nothing. And then maybe down the line, you can help someone perhaps readjust some of their goals or some of their ideas, but at least they've started and they're doing something good versus sitting at home doing nothing. That's my opinion.
And I think, yeah, I want to build on that, because I think, Georgia, you talked about there, like the, you know, strict movements being really important. And I guess maybe you've not been, you know, Battle for Middle Ground, Jailbreak Tour at Faber was your first comp, but then have you done 2 or 3 since then?
A few more than that, I think.
Yeah. So there's
every weekend.
Yeah.
So what I was going to get at then is like recognizing that you want your training to be sustainable. As much as you might be kind of, you know, some people will be focusing on competing, it's important to have like an element of longevity in there. And I think when you talk about strict movement, that can be stuff that, you know, you're not hammering yourself into the ground every weekend or every evening, because that's not sustainable. Just like, I guess, kind of, you know, that kind of, you're never going to be at competition weight in competition physique in bodybuilding all year round, because it's not sustainable either. So I think, you know, there's definitely elements of like, doing bodybuilding can be great for joint health. It can be great for kind of like bulletproofing shoulders or whatever it might be. So I think there's that front. The other thing I want to touch on, and you saying around like you were just so amazed with how happy people were for your achievements, irrespective of their own. And I think for 90, like we talked with, you know, Jason mentioned that we talked about this with like Chase, like last week or whenever it was, like, you know, they're clapping for you, but they're just glad you're behind them. But for 99.99% of us, how someone else does in a workout does not matter to us, because we're not going to the games, we're not vying for a podium. So I think reminding ourselves, whether it be on the competition floor or just down in the box doing a workout, being able to celebrate someone else's successes is like really important. And I think it maybe takes practice, but I think you can then, and to be kind of selfish about it, you can get joy out of it yourself. You know, learning to get joy out of other people's successes is a pretty rich place to be, right? Because there's people all around you.
That's what I love. That's why I MC, man. I get joy out of other people's successes. Like I literally watch them, stand next to them, like, you are amazing.
Yeah.
And I remember now, Georgie, I believe you were in lane 3 or lane 3 or 4 at Battle for Middle Grounds at Faber, if I remember correctly.
I think I was, yeah.
Yeah. And you weren't wearing your glasses. That's why I didn't recognize you.
The old Clark Kent Superman.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That is exactly it.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I've enjoyed this. I thought it was an interesting topic, because we've spoken so much about performance over looks. I just think it's nice to kind of hear from the other side, and then maybe that there are. I did have one final question though, actually, just something that Tom mentioned, because we are obviously spoken to a lot of people that have come into CrossFit from other places. Pretty much everybody, apart from the youngest generation, kind of have come into CrossFit from a different sport, a different background. 80% of the time, you know, there is an injury they've come with, right? So there's an injury I picked up doing rugby, an injury I picked up playing football, whatever it may be. Did you come into CrossFit with injuries because of bodybuilding, or do you think that actually you came in more resilient to things like kipping movements that are putting stress on the joints because of your bodybuilding?
Yeah, I think I came in with a bad back, but that was from pregnancy, not bodybuilding.
Well, literally building a body, I suppose.
Or building another body inside, like.
Yeah.
But yeah, it has less flare-ups now than it ever has before. So from getting, I suppose, more mobile and more flexible and doing the workouts in a different way has benefited me in that.
So that's a good point, isn't it? Because you said you came in with the strength, but not the mobility.
Yeah.
And mobility is so important. And I don't know. It's one of the few things. It's one of the things that I think now, even within other sports, it's talked about a lot more. But it is one of the things that sort of was never really talked about. And again, when you speak to people that were playing rugby or hockey or whatever, they're like, "Yeah, we didn't do any mobility work. That wasn't part of the curriculum. You know, we didn't care." But being mobile is so helpful, not just for CrossFit and training, but life in general. You know, we've all got kids. We all have to bend down and pick up kids, so we know it's really useful when you're mobile. Great. Well, I don't know if anyone else has got anything they want to say, or if we're happy to kind of wrap up the bodybuilding chat here.
Good to me. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you, Georgia.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, Georgia. We like to give a shout out at the end of our episodes to listeners. So this is someone who I don't know if they're a regular listener, but I'm pretty sure they're going to have listened to this episode. So why don't we shout out to Jessica Shelley, that is Georgia's partner in crime for many of the competitions she's been at so far. And Jessica, if you're listening, I would like to get you on the podcast as well, because she was boxing before doing CrossFit. And we've talked many times about whether or not, you know, combat sports or like something where you can physically stop another competitor should be incorporated into CrossFit. So I think that would be a
Tiggy
good person.
Lamppost.
Maybe we could get her on, but we could do it in person and do like a boxing session with her before.
Sam has volunteered to box, so that's good to know. Make a note of that, Tom, because I tell you who's not stepping in the ring and getting punched in the face. That would be me. Well, thank you again, Georgia. Thank you, Tom and Sam and everybody who listened. We'll see you all next week.
Ciao, bye.
See ya.
Bye.